man.
Man,
You got the brothers in the background. You got the line of the tribe of
yeah,
Judah.
yeah,
You
yeah,
got
yeah.
big. You
Well, I
got
got I got the line, me being a Leo. I got my beloved Raiders, doing so pretty well in the NRL at the moment,
well, yeah.
and then of
And you
course the
got the big
three
three.
and the big three, man. That's my inspiration right there. So yeah, yeah.
The old ganja trinity.
Yeah, yeah, that's it, man. That's it. That's it. The
Okay.
king in the middle, man. The king's in
I
the
see
middle.
him. I see him.
Yeah, yeah.
I happen to have an interesting a story with Bob Marley and the Wailers. When he came into Australia, I was working at a place called Bucks. We used to go there actually,
Mm.
and they had the after party there.
Oh
But
shit!
Bob did.
How long ago?
But Bob
How long
did.
ago was this?
This is before he died. This is
Yeah.
before 19. This is before he died
Mm.
because he actually. I think he wrote the independence song from Zimbabwe in 1982.
Oh wow,
So yeah,
that's some
that was
history right
nuts.
there,
Oh
man.
yeah, that's some
Yeah,
history, right? That's
yeah,
right.
yeah.
So
So when did you
yeah,
come? When did you? When did
I
you?
arrived here 76.
76.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. Back then,
And what's your background?
I'm Zimbabwean. I
Oh,
was
so you
born
are
in Zim.
Zimbabwean. Okay,
Yeah, I was
cool,
born in
cool.
Zim. Yeah,
Oh
I'm
man.
from the old Lemba tribe of Zimbabwe.
So
You know,
and what was Zimbabwe like in the time that you were there too? How old were you when you came to Australia?
16.
16. So
Yeah, so that's
you lived a decent chunk of your have you
so
been
that kind of yeah.
you've been back as well?
I've never been
Oh,
back.
you're like me, man. I haven't been back either. Yeah.
I went to go
Got to.
back for the first time this year in June. I was going back to in June. I was going back to Zimbabwe, to Israel, and then back.
Mm,
And COVID hit. See you later.
mm, 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 mm.
Would have been the first time in over 45 years.
What was Zimbabwe like when you were there? I know a little bit, obviously, with our fellow leader Mugabe and all that. Like I know that part of the history, but what was it like out of your eyes, man, Zimbabwe?
Look. As a kid, I mean,
Yeah.
seriously, as a kid, yes, you couldn't go into places that said "ni blanqui," no blacks. But as a kid, you know what? All those things, you don't realize the enormity of them.
Mm.
They were. I had a kid's life. I did fun things. I would look at that and wouldn't know any different.
Mm.
Seriously.
Mm.
But then, as I grew up and as I grew older, I sort of realized, gosh, you really lived that. It was just part of the life. It was just part of the system. We
Mm.
knew that the whites were in control, but the
Mm.
blacks wanted to get power.
Mm.
And coming from, and you got to remember, the Lemba tribe, we were also slightly discriminated against because they're just a small group of black Jews, a small group that are in part of Zimbabwe, and they were also ostracized. You got the larger group, the Mashona, the Matabele. You got tribal wars. You got all of that stuff.
Crazy.
People forget.
Yeah.
I mean, the tribes are kicking the hell out of each other anyway, blacks on blacks.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
people
yeah.
think, I said, no. It wasn't the whites I was worried about. The Indians were kicking my butt. The blacks were kicking. You had all of that going on. So it was like, once you have, and then when you leave the white idea in the equation, everyone looks back and goes, oh, well, the whites oppressed the blacks. Yeah, they did. But blacks oppressed blacks just as
100%,
much.
100%.
We don't talk about that though.
When all this like the whole situation in the States started arising with the Black Lives Matter and all that, I remember putting a post out and I basically said like where I'm from. I mean, if you really go down to the history of it, yeah, there is that influence of the whites and the impact they had, right?
Yes.
But in terms of how the country ended up being governed, or especially where I'm from, where a lot of the decisions they made ended up trickling down to what ended up happening later on with the Civil War and whatnot. But essentially, it was the brown skinned brothers that were oppressing us. It wasn't white people. So I can't.
Same.
You know what I mean? So it's like I said, and that's why I tell people racism is way more deeper than black and white, man. Like, you know what I mean? It's way deeper than So
Yep.
But
you're dead right.
yeah. But for those who don't know, man, I've been Jimmy. Oh man, I was excited for this because I have nothing but great memories, man. When I think about you, because being a guy that obviously got into competing in kickboxing and whatnot. Before I kind of continue, well, let me start with my first memory. This was the funniest memory, and I remember it was a Steve Jez show. It was at Bonnie Rick Sports Club, and it was my first kickboxing fight. And I remember you walked to the back and you were asking everybody for their names and whatnot. And so I remember telling you my name. And I don't know if you remember, but you probably do. My parents and my family were in the first couple of rows.
I remember
and you remembered every fight after that. You always asked me. But I remember you came and asked for my name, and I gave you my name. And little did I know that you were going to actually give me a ring name too. And so I remember everyone sitting there, and I had, like, you know, being my first fight, had like a good group of people that came down, and I just remember standing in the back, and then you were like, Jana Juggernaut, and I was like, did this guy just call me Juggernaut? And I was like, holy shit. And I was like, now these guys are gonna think, like, they're gonna think Juggernaut, and I'm just this dude that's gonna, you know, and
come and destroy him.
Yeah, that's it. And I remember, and I tell my wife to this day, and I tell everyone, I'm like, it was the funniest, because I was like, I didn't know that he was going to give me a ring name. And when he did, I was like, holy shit, I wish he could have changed that. Because I was like, the expectation was like completely different. But, you know, for those who don't know, man, like, obviously, you know, you're a well-known ring announcer. How I got onto you was one of my coaches and a good friend, Jay, who trains out of Bulldogs Castle Hill. And we were training one weekend, and I was like, yo, man, you know what? I want to get on the podcast next. I said, I want to get Jimmy, like, and I want to get in contact with him. And obviously everyone knows you. And that's how it all, you know, came about, because I just found it so interesting, and I just started seeing you everywhere. I remember my second fight, that was with the Bulldogs with Bulldogs Castle Hill, and that was the one in North Sydney. And that's right. And I remember one of my cousins came up to you and said, "Hey man, do you remember us?" And then you were like, "Yeah," and you remember the whole. That
was at
the North Sydney Leagues Club. That's the one. Yeah,
I remember that.
Yeah,
that was a riding out with your group, because they were right into it, and it was great. It was a fantastic atmosphere, man.
Yeah, and I remember, and yeah, it was just, and I don't know, I just felt like at that point, and then as I started building this brand and this platform, it hit to me that, man, it'd be lovely to talk to you. And tell me a little bit about, I don't know too much about your history as to when you got into it, and I know so many people know you and so many people are familiar with you, and how did you kind of go down that route?
You know what, it was funny, because when I arrived here, I was a DJ.
You know what? I ain't surprised.
My family moved to New Zealand, of all places, and I mean, I got to be honest with you, I hated the place. And I know from Askew. And the reason why, it was because I went to Dunedin, and most people would tell you, "Oh, you went to Dunedin." Well, I can totally understand. It was cold. It was freezing. I got this kind of skin.
That you're from Zimbabwe.
You know what I'm saying? You need snow. I mean, come on. My first time with my snow, first time on ice. Yeah. But I just had a horrible experience. But I was a DJ. I won a dance competition in Dunedin, and the prize was 7 days of the Travelodge in King's Cross. Boom. I ended up there. So I ended up in the club scene for a long time. Then one day I went to a Stan the Man and Maurice Smith fight at the Entertainment Center back in, I think it was the late 80s. In fact, you know what? It was the late 80s, and Steve Jez was in the crowd, sitting about 2 or 3 streets from me. And I thought there was this guy that jumped up, big guy, glasses, tall guy, and he started speaking, but he had this paper down here, and he he had glasses on as well, just like I do now, never lifted his eyes off. And I went, I could do this. I must have said it loud enough, because Steve Jez was maybe 4 or 5 seats across. He's gone, "Are you an MC?" I said, "I am." Mind you, I was a DJ with the mic, Back in our day, we had music and we had the mic so we can G up the crowd.
The proper DJ, bro. When it was proper DJ.
There you go. There you go. There you go. No dissing out those guys who mix because I was a shit mixer. Sorry.
Yeah.
I was a terrible mixer. Yeah. But I dropped the song and I'm on the mic. Go for it. He says, I got a show coming at Bonnie Rig. Would you like to do it? How much? So I told him, got the gig.
When was this? When was this in terms of time?
I'm just trying to make sure it is over. Gosh, it is close to 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Easy. In fact, I'm just looking at it now, just checking the actual fight date on one of the fights, which is on here.
Right. So that was it.
Yeah, that's the fight there at the Entertainment Center.
Yeah.
Just can't see the date. See, that was published in 2009, but that's way before that. That was early. That was really early. So it's been, what, nearly 30 years, you know, close to 30, 35 years emceeing. And that was the start of it. Then I ended up going into boxing and I started doing the boxing scene and working for guys in Bill Morty and doing stuff, Kostya and, you know, all of these fight scenes. It was terrific. These different promoters. So I worked in a lot of the different promoters that were around in those days. And of course I continued on. And mind you, I hadn't sort of, I came out, I think it would have been 80, because I went to Bible college. I'll tell you when it was. It would have been 88, 89, because I came out of Bible college in 1988. I went to Bible college because I found Jesus in the early because if I hadn't have found Jesus, I'd probably be dead.
Yeah.
That's what happened to me. And so 88, 89, I believe that's when it started. And then from then on, I just went for, I dropped
DJing,
playing music and DJing in clubs. I just started emceeing. That was it. So then I'd MC gigs, you know?
And how did it, like, was it just from there that people noticed you and then started
It was basically there because what I did was I then made it my mission to be entertaining, but also being able to pronounce fighters' names properly. I was always learning, and I'm still learning now. I mean, I always made it my business to go into a changing room and to ask a fighter, and especially with fighters that we had in those days. You had your Croats, your Greeks, you had all names. I wanted to know exactly how to say your name. Yeah. And if it needed to be said in a nuance that was favorable to your culture, I'd do it. That's it. And I got to know the coaches. I got to know the fighters. I respected the fighters because I always believed this, Jay. I always believed this. Fighters were our greatest commodity. We're nothing without the fighters. And a lot of the promoters who took advantage of stuff over the years, they know who they are. That is the biggest mistake because this is what we promote. We promote the fighters. They're the product. Without them, we've got nothing. I always believed that. So I always believed that we needed to take care of the fighters, whether it was amateur fighters or professional fighters. And I always said that if I ever got into promoting myself, I would want to make sure that would be the case. You know what? Amateurs, we know they don't get paid. But guess what? They do have to get to fights. Families spend money, petrol, buying tickets, doing all that kind of stuff. And to make sure, if that was the case, make sure they take something home, even if it was a sponsors pack, even if it was something that they'd go away to remember. Because remember, people come back only because of having a good experience. If they have a crap experience, trust me, they ain't coming back. They ain't coming back. And especially fight nights and shows were dragged out or, I've had some long fight nights, boy. There's some fights that I've been there at 1 o'clock in the morning. That's a long fight night.
Do you think that the impact of just say, like you touched on with the promoters and the lack of, I guess, the benefits for fighters, does that trickle down to some of the legality aspects that are pushed upon them in, like, for example, with say combat sports, New South Wales, and some of the rules and the regulations that they put on promoters? Because the reason it's a good thing that you brought up is because I always question, like, I'm actually hoping to get in touch with some promoters as well to have this conversation, because I do want to, I'm passionate in my own way about, I guess, the fight game and watching it grow. Just because, like yourself, in the last 10 years, I've been around some athletes and professional athletes, and I see what they go through. And you talk about pricing and even tickets, right? They're not cheap, man, for amateur fight nights or whatever it is, right? You're looking at like $60, $70, right? $70 is for a UFC pay-per-view. You get what I'm saying?
Now, this is interesting. Yeah. You bring this subject up because I'm a promoter as well. I got my promoter's license for that very
beautiful
reason.
Yeah.
This was not, if you think about it, this wasn't the fault of promoters early in the piece. Combat Sports Authority, as a governing body as we know it now, is relatively new. We always had, and the pricing for that, when he used to pay $100. But when the governing body, when the government brought in the Combat Sports Authority and started to legislate and to put in rules and regulations, mind you, based on the idea that they were doing it for the betterment of the sport. In some areas, yes. In some areas, not so. But I believe that when you put in legal teams and people that have got no fight experience, and they've got business acumen, they bring that into play, but they don't also have, why not get fighters, ex-fighters, who have got business acumen and skills to be in these positions because they understand the game. But you got bureaucrats who get into positions that don't understand the game, and they enforce the laws and rules in situations where they've got no idea. I mean, we got guys who used to come to some of our fight nights who didn't even know what a rap was. I mean, no, I'm not joking. You can ask anybody. In fact, if they're listening, they're not going to disagree with me. Because that was the fact. And promoters would scratch their heads going, and you're governing, really? And then, of course, the pricing came. We went to a meeting. All the pricing came about with the ticketing, came about when UFC came to Australia. And we went to a combat sports meeting that was all called for fighters and promoters. And I'd go because I was the MC. I just wanted to hear what was going on. They came up with an idea that they're going to make the flat rate $90 per ticket. And we looked at each other in absolute amazement. From where are you getting those figures from? They pulled those figures out from a UFC fight that first came to Australia. And it sold out in whatever, 20 minutes or whatever it is. You're talking about a conglomerate that it's a billion-dollar industry. They come to a country which is just relatively new, make money, and then base the ticket sales on the minute. Are you insane? All of a sudden, you got families. Say you got 5 families. You got 3 adults. That's $270 for 3 adults. Then you got tickets for the kids. They weren't even that reduced, which I think is unfair. They put a lot of pressure on the promoters, and so over the years, we've had to work out what seems to be a blanket. Now, mind you, in the meantime, don't forget the venues. The venues all of a sudden see dollar signs. Well, guess what? The prices to hire the venues gets jacked up. The promoter, because this is a teamwork. It's a family. Promoters and fighters should be a family working together. Yes, we got the commodity which we need to have and to utilize, but then you got the fans, which is mainly family and friends and uncles and cousins and lovers of the game. You can't price them out of it. It makes it really difficult. So yeah, that was really tough for us to handle. And then, of course, obviously, if you're a promoter, then you've got to think about what type of crowd you want to come. So what most guys did, they do amateur shows. Well, amateur shows don't cost promoters anything in the sense of having to pay fighters money. The pros do, but you've got to hire venues. You've got to hire security. And then when the police got involved, oh, wow. Now you're paying the police.
How do they affect the whole aspect of the night?
They affect the night by the fact that they can stop a fight going on if you have an undesirable who's a fighter. Say, for instance, a fighter who's got, i.e., gang connections. Well, the police can stop that immediately. And then, of course, you get deaths. Somebody dying in the game. We've had a couple of deaths, unfortunately, rest in peace, men that are guys that I knew, that I emceed for. Shame. Really sad. Well, then they've got a governor, Combat Sports Authority, then give power and authority to doctors and to the authority that they can stop fights. All of that comes into play. These are sensitive and very technical things that, yes, I think the duty of care of the fighter is paramount. And I think it's the promoter's duty and the governing body's duty to make sure that the fighters are well, because they're the ones that put the bums on seats and bring in bread and butter into the pockets of promoters. Very important. So duty of care is very important. So yes, but the police, now you had to pay police, because now police had to come to your venue. The police you had to go to the police station to make sure that this fight was on. You're passing it. Now everything is just put, because now you got the law involved. And because, you know what, in one sense, they were trying to weed out undesirables. Because let me tell you something, combat sports, boxing, I mean, seriously, if you look at the history, corruption is paramount in so many ways. And you need the law to try and stop it. You know what I mean? But so it's a tough line to draw, and trying to get a happy medium so all of those authorities and everything else can allow the sport to flow. Well, right now at the moment, we've got nothing in New South Wales.
Yeah.
I mean, COVID has done a great job on that.
Because a lot of the guys, a lot of the guys even I'm training with, man, they're shattered at the moment because they're itching to go, and it's just, I guess, it's just doesn't look like anything's going to really happen anytime soon. So I know Brisbane's Queensland's got a few shows going on, because I know a few guys that are up there. Competing. But I mean, another thing I was thinking about as well was just the whole idea of like the bums on seats, and like where I want to kind of, I guess, where I would like to contribute, and where I feel like I would love to help would be the branding and the marketing aspect of it, because for a lot of the fights, like, you would know more than anybody that, they're happening like halls, or I'm talking like, I'm talking at a certain level, not the bigger fights that happen in stadiums at the grassroots, basically, right? With pros and stuff. And even when they're fighting and they're selling tickets and whatnot, it's generally people that know about the show, or people that are competing and are selling to their friends and their families, right? And the reason this came up to me was because I had a few people telling me like that, they're massive fans, they're massive fight fans, like, but they just don't know where to go to watch. Exactly. And I had a few people telling me that, and I thought long hard about it, and I was like, well, if you think about it, generally people that come to these fights, like, just take my crowd, for example, right? They would have only come because of me. Otherwise, like, they wouldn't have known, you know what I mean? They 100%. Wouldn't have even known. So, and my whole thing was like, you want someone that's, that's living where you are and knows about a fight that's in, I don't know, let's take like Blacktown, for example, a big fat, and is willing to get in a car or on a train or whatever it is and go over there to watch the fights. Because the marketing and the branding of it is reaching out to the wider community, as opposed to just the people that know about the promotion or the event, and also the family and friends of the fighters. You know what I mean? And I feel like as long as it stays that way, you're never going to be able to have the demand for bigger spaces. Bigger auditoriums or whatever it is. It's always going to remain the same, because the numbers are always going to remain the same. But then again, that all comes with adding on top of what you were saying as well, because there's got to be incentives and there's got to be all these other things that go into it, right? If you're paying big money and no one's really getting paid, or that aspect of it, like, I feel like everything connects to everything, right? And it just kind of trickles down. But then it needs to grow as well. And then another thing was like, especially with amateur fights, I guess the quality of it. When I had I had a fight last year, and it was an amateur boxing fight, and I remember the guy pulled out like like I got told about 8 or 9 days before, and then the guy pulled out 3 days later. And it was funny because I was cutting weight. I was like started to cut weight and whatnot. And I remember around that time, combat sports were going through some changes, and they were reaching out to everyone part of combat sports to give their opinion about a few topics. And one of the topics that I kind of sent to them in detail was that you want to increase the quality, and the way you reach the quality is like people need to start being held accountable as well. And if certain people are held accountable, whether it's I didn't go too deep into types of ideas, but just in terms of being disciplined or they get a mark next to them and whatever it is, right? Like when you have a bad financial record or whatever it is, right? They put a mark. It'll push the people that really want to compete, as opposed to just saying, some people having the idea of wanting to compete and then just easily saying no, because on the other end, there's a guy there probably training his, freaking ass off, right? Looking forward to this. So all those things, like, I just feel like all of them need to be connected. So I feel like if you're going to charge people that kind of pricing, right? I understand with the payments and whatever, right? But if you're going to charge people to come to fights, you want to ensure that the quality of fights are there too. Like you said, that will put bums on seats. Then that also comes down to the marketing and the branding and reaching out to the wider community and actual fight fans. You want to get them. You want to get them on a Friday or a Saturday night saying, yo, there's where there's a Steve Jess show, whatever it is, right? Like, for example, and be like, let's go, let's go down and watch it. And, they may be 45 minutes away, but they're willing to go because they're fight fans and the quality of fights are going to bring them there. So it was something that always kind of, I was always thinking about, because I just felt like, how is it going to grow, and then, it's just going to kind of stay the same way. So, where do you think, or like, what do you think are some of the ideas and some of the, I guess, processes that can happen for us to kind of move towards that direction? What do you think needs to happen?
Well, I think let's look at the climate we're in right now, because I think everything that we've had in the past is gone. And I say this in the light of COVID, because everything has to now be built from that premise. The amount of people that can come, the amount of spacing they're going to have, because I reckon that's going to be around for a while.
Yeah.
Indoors, all of that kind of stuff. It makes it really tough. So that means there's going to have to be a rethink with promoters, if promoters will want to promote, because the pressure's on now. If you're not going to be allowed to make the numbers, especially a pro show or an amateur show, for the end of the day, amateur shows make money too. No one does it for no money, but the numbers are going to determine how and what kind of promotion you're going to have. Then that filters back to the gyms. What type of gyms remember when the gyms got shut? Well, guess what? Fighters couldn't train. They weren't allowed to go to a gym, and then they opened the gyms, then fighters could come. Then you're only allowed a certain amount of numbers. Then you're only allowed to have social distance within gyms. All of these restrictions really make life very, very different. It's not going to be business as usual as it was. But there's no reason to think that we can't adjust and have business in the future viable. It's very possible. How we maintain it and how we go forward is going to be heads together, combat sports included. Because if you think right now combat sports is shut, but these guys are still getting paid. Okay. But they're not doing work you know what? Maybe it's not fair on my part to say that, because I don't know what they're actually doing on the ground to make things happen for us, because it is a government office. So everything is governed by what the government says about what can be open and what can't be open. So maybe they are, and I'm sure they are looking into in the ways of how to make this thing happen. Fighters are still going, obviously something's going on, but fighters need to have their records up to date and everything else and go into other states. So they obviously still need to be involved with the Combat Sports Authority. Hopefully this changes. And we do have an opportunity to get shows up and running, and they'll be different, but why can't they be better? And you're right, marketing is going to be a big key. Are we using the social media platforms, and are we using them well? Do we utilize those who have great skills? And I think sometimes I'm not tech savvy. So you need to find someone that is within your group, within your people. Find someone that's going to be able to do that. So you get a hand up, a stand up, an advantage, so to speak, technically, social media wise, so you can get your brand branded and seen. And then venues. Now, mind you, working with venues can't be charging us the same money they charged us before COVID came. You know what I mean? Maybe we need to look about the ticket pricing. Maybe we need to look at how people have lost jobs and don't have as much money, because there isn't as much money as there was. Let's be honest. So maybe we need to look at how we can restructure that and make things viable for families. Maybe family packages. I mean, I don't see why you can't do that. And I'm sure some promoters probably listening to this and thinking, well, damn, I could do that. Why not? You got a family of 5. Why not make a family package? You do that at the football. You do that at all these other sports. Well, why not do that in this case?
And then that's exactly it. And I feel like with that kind of formality, that would lead to providing a really good platform as a platform for us to not only get people there, but actually help grow the sport, right? Because that's really what it's about. It's about being able to grow the sport, and I think all the
light.
You're right, mate. Yeah. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And see me.
Yeah, for sure.
Black. Okay, let me sit down here somewhere.
They're gonna think I'm talking to myself.
Hang on a sec. Yeah. So I think, and then they'll see at least that way. These guys are not in it just for themselves. They want to actually help us and want to make things work for the betterment of the sport. Because I've always done it for the sport.
Yeah, and I think all the people that are involved, from venues to promotions to whatnot. I think when these situations arise, deal with it and attack it in a different way as a team. Like you said, like, this is an event and you want everyone to benefit, and if everyone benefits, then there's only going to be one thing, people are going to keep benefiting, and it's going to grow. So a situation where there's an event, maybe the pricing should be a bit different to cater for that event, as opposed to treating it like anything else. You know what I mean? So because
I think this season's going to do that.
Yeah.
This season, I believe, is going to change that. And I believe it has to change that. Because because you got to think about it, a lot of these venues are shut. There's nothing in there. So now there needs to be a renegotiating. Stop raping and pillaging the sport to try and, because I mean, people, let's be honest, people do it, we promote and we do stuff to make money. Businesses are open to make money. It'd be foolish to think, you know what, people are there to make money. But let's work together. You know what I'm saying? I mean, some of these venues that had no one in them, all of a sudden they started getting venues in it. People, shows coming in. All of a sudden you're noticing the price was changing. And of course they added catering, and then the price went even higher. And it's like, all of a sudden promoters go, no, I actually want to make money, because you don't want to promote. A lot of promoters don't make money I'm telling you now, a lot of promoters don't make money.
I mean, that's exactly, what I've been told as well. Yeah.
They don't make money.
Yeah,
they don't make money. And it's tough because you're dealing with niche market. You'd like to think that all sports people like to get involved in all sports, but not necessarily. Some people don't like kickboxing. Some people don't like MMA. Some people don't like boxing. So my key was, I wanted to all right, let's create something that they all like. Maybe a hybrid show. You promoters, I know you're listening. Why not? A hybrid show. But having really good fighters who want to fight. And of course, gyms. I mean, you got to think about this. The grassroots, the gyms where these things are birthed out of, they're little businesses with guys that are ex-fighters, all fighters currently who are building a brand for themselves, and within it, people decide, oh, you know what, I'd like to have a fight. And it's tough for these guys because then they have to train these guys. They've got to find someone to train them, and usually the trainers get paid as well. And so it's tough. And so I've really got a big heart for these guys, and the guys that run their gyms and continue to run their gyms even now with COVID. I mean, you got SRG, and you got all these different. You got Reinhardt and his crew out at Blacktown, and a whole bunch of others. And Paul Nassari's got his boxing gym here, and you got Box Camp, and you got all these guys wanting to get fighters on, but they've got no shows to put them on. So yes, they've got to go to Queensland. And now, mind you, I don't know how they're getting into the borders because apparently no one can use South Wales to go.
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't understand how that's working, but is it because it's work? I don't get it. So, all right, I'm not even going to question it.
Yeah, I think it's some sort of exemption. Yeah.
Well, exemptions cost money.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I heard the Queensland Premier say, well, you know what? Yeah, we let these people in because they got money.
Yeah.
Oh, really? So if you ain't got no money, you ain't coming in. But if you're cashed up, guess what? You can come to Queensland.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's nuts. It's nuts. Yeah. But that's what's happening.
Yeah.
And it's a shame. But I like the idea of what you're talking about, wanting to look at different ways to promote our sport, and because that's what I've always wanted to do. I wanted to retire at one stage because I was frustrated. And then I went, no, I love my sport. I love this sport. The sport is not about the fighting. It's about men and women. It's about family. This is a family. Lots of guys won't know what to do at the end of the fight. So someone needs to be there. I want to get and build a platform where, you know what, there's a lot of guys who suicide, depression. These are all things that we got to think about, because fight game doesn't last forever. MCing, you don't MC forever. But you know what? Your people who have got family and friends, and that's for however long you got, that's important. If you can build that kind of platform to be able to deal with those kind of issues that arise. How many guys died last year in our fight game from depression and suicide? I mean, this is real. People go, nah, it's real. We don't know what happened behind closed doors.
I mean, even when you're talking about, just people with history, and, when you were talking about the police coming, and obviously, people, criminals or have a criminal background. But even if you think about boxing, right, it was gateway from poverty, from like boxing is life. It is life. You know what I mean? So who are you fucking kidding if you don't get someone that has come from nothing, or has come from from a world of crime or doing crime, or because literally that's what boxing has done, and that's what it's built on. The greatest boxers here, where they had fucking nothing. You know what I mean? So it was either the life in the streets, or it was go and fight and make something of yourself, right? And obviously with boxing, there's so much money in it,
That's right.
When your time, is there certain moments that really stand out to you, whether it's fights or calling fights, certain fights that really stand out to you that you think, damn, I'm so glad I got to kind of witness it, up front?
Wow. Stan the Man, Dennis Alexia, Melbourne.
What year, if you remember?
Oh, gosh. Oh, my goodness. Oh, gosh, I can't remember. I can't, top of my head.
What was it about it that stood out for you?
Stan the Man was fighting Dennis Alexia. Dennis Alexia at this time, when you remember Bloodsport?
Yeah, I remember Bloodsport. Yeah.
Well, it was based on his life.
Yeah.
He comes, and all of a sudden, he's going to fight him in Melbourne. So the place is buzzing. No, I mean buzzing. I flew from Sydney. I said, I've got to go to this fight. Yeah. And Stan and I have got a great relationship. I love Stan. I've done a few of Stan's fights, and I love the man. A brother in Christ, and he's also an advocate for looking after the downtrodden and the less fortunate. And that's giving back to the sport. And I love the fact that he's also the first combat sports fighter to be inducted into Australia's Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Just magnificent, I thought. And yeah, Stan the Man was an unbelievable night when he won. Chopped him in the leg, broke the leg, boom, it was out. The place went crazy. Crazy. Yeah, look, a lot of the local fights as well, you know, I mean, the McKinnon boys.
Yeah. So I trained. Yeah, I had the pleasure of training.
Yeah,
I had the pleasure of training with Stu and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, some of those fights were nuts. Costa Zoo fights, you know, Jeff Fennick fights, Anthony Mundine fights. You know, I emceed 5 of Anthony's fights in the early days, and to me, polarizing. Love him, hate him, but he woke the sport up when it was dying.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And people go, yeah, I said, that's fine. But I tell you right now, in a lot of cases, a lot of boxers are very glad the fact that they fought on his shows, because he gave them a platform to be able to do it.
He was everything, man. He was, you know, showman. He just he brought you, he made you tune in. And I remember me and one of the boys from the McKinnon, from Stu's gym, we're talking about it. We're like, love him or hate him, bro. That guy he's a full-blown athlete. Like, he did, you know, he played like rugby league at the highest level.
He could have been a number 1 basketball player.
And I know a story, and you know, and like you said, love him or hate him, but when you meet him, he's the most humble guy. And the reason I know this is because I met him. But he also did there was a period, maybe like it's probably going back now 12 years or something. Just remember, it was just out of high school, and you know that, you know, you have dance parties and all that stuff. And one of the dance parties was sponsored by Xbox, and had a Sri Lankan guy who was working for Xbox, and he was like one of the heads, I think, from memory. And I think they were sponsoring the Rabbitohs at the time or something like that.
Yes.
Man, Mundine came down, and I remember this, and I was off my face, right, at this club. It was the one in Darling Harbour, just on the other side of Pyrmont Bridge.
Home was?
Not where home was, but on the other side.
The other side. Okay.
Where what's that place where the shopping center was, and on the docks, it was docks, or whatever, docks. Yeah. And I remember I was in the crowd, and here he is, like Mundine. And man, like, you say hi to him, and fuck, he was willing to take a picture, fucking having a chat to you. And then we had we had a similar thing, but we had like it was like a indoor soccer, like a charity day. And I missed this, but I heard this story. Like, I think I had just left, maybe, or I had just rocked up after, I'm not sure, but everyone else was there, and it was for our community. It was run by our community, and Mundine just rocks up, man, in this like Hummer limousine, I think it was, and gets out, and just, bro, he rocked up to some little community charity thing that, you know, and came and took pictures and said hi to everybody. And that's what I said. I was like, and I remember that because it struck out to me, because I'm like, they all have these ideology of who he is, right, based on looking through the TV screen. Sure. But when you meet the man, he's
totally different story.
Yeah, he's a fucking humble guy, man. Like, it's ridiculous how humble he is. Humble he is. Like,
he was the people's champ. I mean, the indigenous people of Australia, especially, there was a big love for him. And yes, he polarized a lot of people. I mean, stuff that happened, that 9/11 stuff, you know, that's all history now. Gone. But he, I love Chalk. I love his family. I recently ran into his son on the train, actually.
Right.
His son, Bo, and I looked at him. You know, because Bo was named after his uncle Bo. Because he's Bo Mundine. There's family. There's just all this incredible family just all over the place. And it's magnificent. And of course, there was Sharon Anyos. Sharon Anyos was the first Australian boxer, fought in Queens at the Convention Centre for a world title.
Right.
And I was there.
Yeah.
You know, all of these things, I had the pleasure of being there and doing it. So to me, it was crazy.
Do you ever trip out, man? Do you ever trip out how you've, you know, just like, you're a DJ, and then, you know, by chance, the, you know, someone just, someone heard you, and then before you know it, like years on in, man, like, and it's not even at the highest level, right, Jimmy? It's people at like me and people that you meet at grassroots. They fucking remember you. They remember you, like, you know what I mean?
Because to me, they were just
and you remember them. Like, even my second fight, it was a while between drinks, but you remembered my family. You asked it. I remember the first thing you asked me after I won. I'm fucking like, I've just gone 3 rounds, and the first thing I remember this, the first thing you asked me is like, is your mom and dad here?
Yeah, and, because they were huge that night. It was that huge
at the Steve Jez show.
And the pride that they had. See, I tell you what. Now you're talking about memories. These are the things and the memories that I have about a lot of fighters and their families that would come to fights. I would make a real point of really building the fighter up, and I knew their family was there, and family would come, and even family would come to me, thank you for pronouncing my son's name or my daughter's name correctly. These things meant something to them, and it meant something to me. So I always believed that. I thank God for the sport, because I'll tell you right now, I was very shy. I never had very much self-confidence. Going into the fight game and announcing was a tuition for me. It was at school. It helped me to become a public speaker. It really did. And still to this day, I mean, I'm still nervous, and have I made mistakes in the fight? Absolutely. I mean, sometimes there's one particular fight that I'll never forget. I remember starting, I'll never forget it as long as I live, because it was at the entertainment center.
Yeah.
I can't remember the promotion at the top of my head right now, but which started at about 10 o'clock in the morning, and at 12 o'clock it was going to go live to the States and live to Europe and all of that. I remember speaking to the Combat Sports Authority guy, and I just spoke to him about his name and got into. We just turned and we panned to go live, and I went completely blank. I didn't even remember. Man. I didn't even know where I was, Jay. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know what my name was. I didn't know anything. Completely blank. And I was like, woo! Just like that. I just went, woo! I did. Yeah. And then I looked, as soon as I went, woo, I looked straight to the red corner, and I went from the red corner and from the blue corner, blah, 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 did all that, got off, and I was so embarrassed. I felt terrible. And I remember internet went gangbusters. Oh man,
they got
I had
you.
Story.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, have you seen the worst? You hit the worst MC in the world, blah, blah, blah. And I'm not joking. My daughters even came up and said it to me. Dad, what happened? I said, darling, if I could tell you, I wouldn't have a clue. I don't know what happened. Yeah. What was encouraging was I got a lot of the guys from the UFC, Tito Ortiz and all these guys who ended up encouraging me, saying, hey, get off his back. If you've done the job, if that was the first time I'd ever done that in over 25 years, I never made it. I'd never forgotten a thing like that. And they really encouraged me. And that really showed me, you know what, there was a family within the family that goes, you know what, we all make mistakes. I learned from that. It's
like, I mean, I guess it's like anything, man. Like, it's like, you know, if you're tying it into fighting, right? Like, it's easy to sit there and criticize, but when you're doing it, you realize it's very different when you're doing it, as opposed to, you know, sitting and criticizing.
1000%.
So do you, have you like developed anything in terms of, kind of pre-night rituals or anything that you kind of depend on, or now you just that was enough of a night to be like, I ain't ever doing that shit again?
You know what I did that night, bro? I'll tell you, Jay, what I did that I said I'd never do again. I decided to go by verbatim, just to not look at my notes.
Yeah.
Nah, you got notes for a reason.
Oh, so you weren't using notes that night?
I didn't use my notes for just after the intro. Okay, no, I serious, and I learned from that day. No, you got notes for a reason, to give you bullet points. Because usually in a lot of cases, a lot of things are very similar. Introductions are similar. The intros can be nuanced in flow. I like to keep things natural, but there's just things that you don't want to play with, and that's one of the things. So from that day on, I never played with that ever. I just realized, you know what? You got to keep it. You got to keep it structured.
Yeah. Well, it's like, yeah, that's true. And do you like, do you draw? I mean, I guess it's different when you ask a fighter this question, right? Do you draw inspiration from anyone? But do you draw inspiration from like even just fights that you've grown up watching, or because, you know, take for example, you know, Bruce Buffer, right, with his It's Showtime with the UFC,
Yep.
especially for a big fight, like people that are there or people that are watching know that moment, right? And
Yep.
it's like the moment when he goes, it's, you know, showtime, or it's time, sorry. And everyone just gets G'd up, you know, and people are saying it and whatnot. Two-part question then. Do you draw inspiration, and have you, like, what has been some of the, you know, obviously me being a fan and me telling you my experiences.
Yeah.
What are some of the other experiences that you've had with people, like calling their names out or shows, in terms of feedback, or in terms of just, just creating a dialogue with you about, how good it was or whatever, like, do you have many moments like that with people?
I think every night of every fight night that I've ever had, I've always had an encounter with someone within the crowd who has been extremely excited about the job that I did. Did I ever take that? I always took that with humility. It means that I did my job the way my job was supposed to be done. I satisfied somebody's desire. I spoke, I announced a fighter correctly. I encouraged them. Win. And one of the things that was very strong on, win or lose, to me, they were both winners, the guys that jumped in that ring. I was never one to take sides of the fight. Never. I would always encourage all. And if the guy lost the fight and he fought extremely well, I'd go to the changing room and I'd say something to him. And that would really encourage him. Even though their parents were there, I would always encourage them, because that's what they need. They don't need to be, because some people would, oh man, you know what, nah. I'm always about encouraging. And my inspirations for emceeing, Michael Buffer and Jimmy Lennon Jr. were the ones that I looked to. I mean, every MC has got one. Every MC has got one. I'm not a Bruce Buffer fan. And I think Bruce Buffer has his own the way of doing it. And if you look at Bruce Buffer, how he's changed, if you have a look at the original Bruce Buffer and look at what he does now, that all changed. And he found a niche for himself.
I mean, I grew up with Michael Buffer, not only with boxing, but I was a big WWF fan. And I remember Michael Buffer, you know, when he did the Let's Get Ready to Rock. Oh, man, I used to lose my shit as a kid. So, like, Michael, I didn't even know Bruce Buffer existed till I watched UFC, to be honest. So, Michael Buffer, for me, probably, when I think of announcers, he stands out to me.
He's the king.
Would you call him the GOAT, or would you?
Oh, he is. To me, he is. To me, he is. To me, he is. Now, mind you, Jimmy Lennon Jr., different style. I love him too. There's, I think there's the South American guy. There's a few of them. There's a few of the boys that are in the circuit that I love. Some of the old school ones. I used to love some of the old school ones. We used to put the mic out of the roof. And I got promoters to do that, to make sure I wanted to do that. And
that would suit you really well.
Right. And you dressed. And another thing about it, I got a chance to dress. You know, there wasn't places that you could suit up. And I had a place to suit up. I was all dressed with a place to go, not all dressed up without a place to go, as something that used to happen in the club scene. I had somewhere to go. And it was my night out. It was my night out. I'd enjoy the company of the people that I went there with. I'd love the people that come to the fights. So, and the families, even some of the ones that had come from promotions where families lost their kids. Those touching moments that I would raise funds for them. We raised some incredible funds for a kid that lost his, I think, died not long after we raised the funds for them at a show in Beachcomber.
For, that wasn't the Charlie Jonah fight, was it? That one?
Charlie's fight.
Charlie's fight
was another one. There was that fight. Charlie's fight. Oh,
because I was doing some photography for him that night. And I don't know if you remember this, But I remember the night was done and I was with my wife, right? And we're walking out. And as we're walking out, I'm going to the left and I hear this voice in the corner of my ear at the front. And I turn around and there's Mr. Jimmy White standing there. And so I look at my wife and I said, I can't, I need to go say hi to him because he will remember me when he sees my face. And you're in the front entrance. I think you had your suitcase on you and everything. And I remember telling him, I'm like, do you need a lift, man? Like, how you going home? And I remember I came over because your voice was so distinctive. Yeah, I was there that night. I was there for Charlie that night. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's amazing, man. I mean, I've been wanting to do this for a minute, and I just didn't know how to get a hold of you, and that was the frustrating thing. But then I knew some people that have been in the game for a long time. So I was like, man, I'm trying to get a hold. And he's like, oh, here. And he just gave me the phone and said, this is his Facebook. This is his Instagram.
I'm so glad you did.
And then, man, I just have nothing but humble memories. And I know that you're such a big figure in your own right. And so you should be, because everything that you spoke about, you know, in our podcast today, you know, about what it means to you. People like me, and I'm sure many others can actually see it. And it's always a fucking good night. And I'm so humbled that, you know, like, I'm not in this to make money. And, you know, I like yourself, like, you know, how you found Christ. I found kickboxing and boxing and through tough times, and, you know, and ever since then it's in my DNA, you know. And it's funny because by doing that, later on I found out that my grandfather, which I never knew, back in Colombo in Sri Lanka, he had a big fight, and he beat a champion in the 60s, and I didn't even know. Wow. And so my cousin always tells me, he's like, man, this shit's probably in your DNA, you just never knew. It is. You know, and ever since being part of it, I've made it a mission to grow it in my own way. That's why I got athletes on, and you know, different athletes come on the show, and I try to do some promotional work, and the whole idea of, you know, Mercer Entertainment is, you know, like Vice. I want to create a platform for the Australian culture, and then, you know, whether it's short documentaries, could be in the food scene or whatever it is. But fighting is one aspect of it because of what it's given me. In the short time that I've been part of it, and the people I've got to meet, and I'll always be grateful, and it'll always be a memory, man. And who knows, you know, I always say, you know, like, you know, next year, before you know it, I might be making the walk again. But
you never know.
Yeah, but I'm really grateful, man, because I have very humble memories of you calling me out, and not even just that, but just the humbleness and the love that you showed me after fights, before fights, and not even just for me, but just the people around me, you know, the supporters and the people that were there. You know, you always took notice, and I noticed that always about you. You always took notice about it, and made an effort, and that's why, man, I wanted to chat to you, because I think it's important for our culture here to understand, you know, how much of a polarizing figure you actually are. Because, you know, because, like, take for example with fighting and whatnot, like, one of the things we talked about with quality of fights is that we don't want to have to send people to America to go and train in boxing gyms to get better. Right. You want to be able to have that same quality of training here. Right. And that's the whole idea. And that the way that happens is, from all the fighters that I've spoken to, is that, you know, the way it starts is that the best fighters need to fight the best fighters. Right. And that's how it starts. And you know, and instead of people having to go overseas to the States, because it shows you how behind we really are, and how much we are a baby when it comes to that part of the scene, you know. But one of the things that I grew up a lot around watching entertainment in America in terms of hip hop and videos and interviews and how these things were done and how they celebrate the culture and how it's all connected. And that was when I was, 13 years ago, when I was, when I was 17, 18, 19, 20, I was just every day studying. To this day, every morning, the first thing I do is I got my coffee and I'm there and I'm reading up on hip hop news and music news. And I see how the interviews and all that happen. And I told myself that this is what I want to do for the Australian culture is is that let's not wait 20, 30, 40 years to celebrate someone and sit there and think, oh, wow, how great is this? 20, 30 years ago, because success and all these great people, they're around us. It's your perception, right? And the way we've grown up here, or even in general, is that success is untouchable. So like when we think of success, whether it's celebrities, it's things that we can't touch. It's things that we can't be in the presence of, and we think that's greatness. But these people are just like me or you or anybody that had to work their fucking ass off and get to where they were. So if you're in their area, chances are you run into them at the grocery. You get what I'm saying? But we've grown up to believe that these things are too great. But for me, I believe that, God's given me an eye to be able to see greatness around and all these people doing great things. And that's what, Mercenary Entertainment is about. And that's what Into the Deep podcast is about is, hey, like, stop looking over there. There's some great motherfucking people around us in this culture, and we need to appreciate them while they're here, because one day I guarantee you we're going to look back and think, whoa, how great was that? You know what I mean? And I don't want to wait till then. It's about giving people their flowers while they're here, And,
I totally agree.
And that was the whole idea of being able to get in touch with you, man, because was that, what you do stands out to me. And I know that everyone knows that, and everyone that, has been part of the fight game know who you are. And yeah, man, I just, want to show like how appreciative we are of you, bro. And that was the whole idea of it,
I want to thank you, Jay. I really do. And I want to thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share the love that I've had for the last 30 or 40 years in the sport. And I just think it's just been amazing. It was an honor to meet you and your family and all the guys that I've met throughout the years. I mean, I tell you what, it's the game, it's the sport that really made, it really is the thing that molded me. And I can never take that for granted. And so the fight family is numero. I mean, where we go from here, it's going to be important to surround ourselves with like-minded people that can assist us. 100%. The reality is to know that we can't do it on our own.
100%.
There's people around us who have got skills that we need to utilize and to grab around them and just huddle and do this as a team. It's a team effort. There's no I in team. We know that. And that's the reality. And this is the only way it's going to succeed. But I encourage you to keep going with this. And I love, it's called The Deep Connection.
Into the Deep is the podcast.
Into the Deep is fantastic. I love that because that's exactly where you have to go to find the quality fish. It's not on the surface. It's in the deep. And if we go there together, at least we know we can do this together, and nothing's impossible. Nothing will be impossible. And you mentioned God. Well, I tell you what, with God, nothing is impossible. And if you remember, if you look at the word impossible, it starts with I'm possible. That's right. You, me. That's what it is. I'm possible with God. I can do anything. There's nothing that I can't do without him. But, and you know what, is to acknowledge those people. And I think you're right, is to acknowledge those people that's gone before us, because let me tell you something. Everyone's here because someone else has done something beforehand. And we're walking on the bodies and the stones and the footsteps of those that have gone before us.
100%.
I wasn't, you know what I mean? There was MCs and everything else prior to me. And I looked at them and I thought, you know what? I could glean from that, take from that. And
there's going to be the next generation that's going to look at you, man. You know what I mean?
It happens.
It happens, man. And that's just how things grow, and that's how things need to grow, right? So,
that's right.
But look, man, I won't take too much of your time anymore. But I appreciate you, Jimmy. You have no idea. Appreciate you so much. And pleasure. And I'm sure we'll run into each other again, man.
I hope so. And I hope I see you and I get to call the Juggernaut once again. So thank you so much, Jay.
Appreciate
and
you,
all the
brother.
best. Keep doing what you're doing. But this is awesome.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Ta. Thank you. Ta.
See you, buddy.